The Sabrael Confession, the Heavenly War Chronicles, Book 1, written by Stephen Smith and read by Christopher Neal de San Fernando. Chapter 3. I don't know where Lucifer went when he left me in that field, but wherever it was, no one could find him. When he didn't return for some time, I knew it was trouble. We were all used to him disappearing when the Almighty requested his private counsel. But this was something else. The way he left, his words before he vanished, despite his temper. I couldn't stop worrying about him and all he was experiencing. I only wanted to help him. I didn't want to be his judge. The host was in turmoil over our rogue brother. Every discussion focused on his mysterious disappearance and the events that led to his self imposed exile. Depending on which circle one listened to, opinion swayed from condemnation to applause for his step into the unknown. I couldn't escape the conversations in every hall, the rumors and theories and gossip, and with each comment overheard, I thought, Lucifer, can you hear what you have caused? Are you listening even now? And is your strange feeling growing? The only thing that could quiet the rampant speculation about Lucifer's disappearance turned out to be his return. It happened first as a whisper in silent circles, sightings in the forests and such. Whispers then grew to a chant, and soon the whole kingdom buzzed in anticipation. I started to suspect he was orchestrating it all to incite the greatest possible reaction. Again and again, I returned to that field where I last saw him, replaying our conversation 100 times over. My worry had only intensified in his absence, and the anticipation of his return was unbearable. Why must he do this? I thought. Why cause such havoc when we simply want him to return and accept the Almighty's help? Does he not realize we miss him? But the moment he appeared, I knew that the childlike Lucifer, the angel more beloved than any, who brought me forth from silence to the company of our brothers, was gone. When confirmed reports of his return rippled through the kingdom, everyone dropped what they were doing and swarmed to catch a glimpse of our prodigal brother. Emerging from one of the many fields in his hall, Lucifer strode into view, shining with a light all his own. Golden curls draped around an eerily pleased smile. He met those crowding to see him with open arms. Many ran to envelop him in an embrace of feathered wings and flowing robes, calling out his name and questioning where he'd been and what he'd done. I stayed where I was, watching this insane spectacle from afar. Lucifer basked in the attention, but I soon realized what was really bothering me as I looked at him. His glow. It was tainted somehow, no longer pure. No longer pure. As heaven exists solely in the spiritual plane, an angel's glow isn't a physical thing like light. It's more an impression, an aura. Tainted as he was, it was unsettling to even look at him. Once I recognized this impurity, I also noticed I wasn't the only one. It was clear that those who didn't run to his side also saw it. Michael looked at Lucifer in utter horror, motionless as he stared wide eyed at our brother. The crowd around Lucifer teemed with questions, but he waved to silence them, promising to answer all in time. Then his gaze fell on me. The smile that spread across his lips terrified me. The sea of angels parted before him as Lucifer made his way to embrace me. Have you nothing to say, Sabrael? I get no greeting at all from my dearest friend. I could almost feel his new glow pulsing, infecting my own. I backed away. You were my friend, Lucifer. I do not know who you are now. I thought I saw something in his eyes when I said this, something of shame or remorse, perhaps, but I can't be sure. More likely, I yearned to see some evidence that my friend still existed somewhere. Whatever the case, Lucifer laughed at my words, and those following him echoed in an eerie chant, already beginning again to do what they were forbidden to do. Without another word, Lucifer strode past, slowing to stare down Michael before continuing out of sight, the long train of his followers trailing behind. In the wake of Lucifer's return, heaven underwent distinct change. The gatherings felt quieter, less energetic, and the times between saw the host split into two factions: those of us who remained as we always had been, and those who believed Lucifer's radical new ideas should be made reality. Lucifer refused to do his assigned task. He stopped singing the praise of the Almighty altogether, electing to sit alone rather than attend the gatherings with the rest of us. When we would return, we'd find him amidst piles of plucked grass or surrounded by hundreds of stripped flower petals. He seemed utterly bored with all around him, except when someone new would come to hear his tales and revel in his magnificence. The rest of us he ignored. Nothing we could say or do was of any importance. Many tried reasoning with this new Lucifer, who was not as he should be, but he brushed them aside like flies. When I tried, he wouldn't even meet me, instead, sending one of his loyalists to inform me I had nothing to say worth hearing. This was his attitude toward existence now, that he alone knew the meaning of his change, and therefore he alone mattered in the grand scheme. Michael continued to grow more troubled at the state of Lucifer's condition. It seemed heaven itself trembled with distress, and Michael reflected the horrible anxiety like no other. While my brothers and I tried to reach Lucifer, Michael floated among us without speaking a word to anyone, his face hidden behind his long, ebony hair. His patience is great, and kept quite a long time, and he kept quiet a long time. But eventually, the sadness that ate at him became a burden too heavy for even him to hear. I don't know what Michael said to Lucifer when he finally confronted him. In all the time since, Michael has refused to tell anyone. I do know, however, that after they spoke, two things were grievously apparent. The first was that Lucifer was beyond Michael's help. He even came away from their discussion with a new resolve, it seemed. He started inviting those he once shunned to partake in his game of hiding when we were called together, and a good number actually joined him. Like an insolent child testing his boundaries, he ran ever nearer the inevitable outcome of such disobedience. He was going to be punished. The second was that something Michael learned increased his anguish 100-fold. What it was remained a mystery, for as I said, Michael never spoke of their talk, but it sent him spiraling into a depression so severe he shut down completely. It was abundantly clear Lucifer's sickness went deeper than any of us suspected. Michael's misery shifted from troubled sadness to genuine despair. If any of my brothers did not know fear before then, I was sure they did now. Attendance in the Hall of Song continued to dwindle. More and more angels turned from the worship of the Almighty, and Lucifer's arrogance swelled to see so many answering his call. Songs they once sang for him were revived, with new praises even being composed while the rest of us were in the great hall. They treated us like they guarded some secret, and all the while Lucifer coerced more to join them, increasing his cult to gigantic proportions. Heaven's expansion halted as duties went undone. The games and laughter of angels at play were gone, and conversations, when they were when there were any, focused on the deterioration of our progress. Every sight of Lucifer wrenched my nerves. The fear that he would soon be punished by the Almighty ruled my thoughts. Fear. Amazing that a concept so alien to the kingdom could grow to hold sway over so many in such a short time. I prayed my fear for him would be the most horrible thing I would ever know, for I could little stand even that. But then a much greater fear was brought to light, a thing I'd feared for a long while but didn't realize until it happened. Lucifer finally turned his attention back to me. I want you with us. Those were his first words to me in so long I'd lost track, as though all his slights to me had never occurred. Face to face, his cold gaze boring into my skull, it was obvious this wasn't the Lucifer I know or knew. But by any means, he'd been broken down and discarded by angels who placed this mockery of him on a pedestal. This perversion before me, standing with its head down in mock respect, was an abomination. Come to our gathering when next we meet, Sabrael. Come and see what it is to be free. Free of what? I contested. Of the illusion, brother. The illusion that we are now all that we are meant to be. The only illusion I see is this newfound understanding you claim to have found. Lucifer smiled, his child face beaming. So amazingly beautiful, so incredibly horrific. You and I once spoke about why we praise God, and what did I tell you? That I was feeling things only He feels, and that I enjoyed it though I understood it not. I dedicated myself to controlling this feeling, to recognizing what causes it, and I now know why I feel it, and you do not. Lucifer leaned close, and once again I could feel his tainted glow like a siphon feeding off my own. I have even learned to pass on this gift. Please, let me share this enlightenment with you, the one I care for most. It is all I have wanted since I returned. There are times when fear can rise up to overwhelm each of the senses and take control of one's entire being. Standing there with him, I felt that kind of fear. I was in the sights of a lion, his golden mane falling around icy blue eyes. I knew I must not join him, but how could I tell that to the one who taught me how to live? Enlightenment? I asked, imploring. Can you not see what you are doing to the kingdom? How can you call this enlightenment? My eyes have been opened to a truth we have long been kept from seeing. So even you sing your own praise now? Lucifer, you have become the very thing you once fought to stop. I was ignorant then, little brother. The addition of the word little was like a slap to the face. I have changed in so many ways since then. You certainly have. You are no longer the angel I looked up to and wished to impress. That Lucifer is gone, hidden from everyone, even yourself. You are a stranger to me now, and I would never turn my back on the Almighty at the beckoning of a stranger. Lucifer studied my face as if searching for some possibility of changing my mind. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I would explode. Do not make an enemy of me, Sabrael. I only want things to be as they were between us. As do I. I pray they one day will be, but I cannot join you in this. I'm sorry. He stood there for a long moment, emotion roaring in his eyes, then flew away. I knew I had upset him deeply. The alternative was unthinkable, but still, the immediate remorse I felt was so overpowering that had he only tried harder to persuade me then, he may have succeeded. Soon after my refusal to join Lucifer's gatherings, he vanished again, this time taking his supporters with him. It was obvious the possibility of my inclusion had been the only thing keeping him from departing sooner. The halls were gutted with the sudden withdrawal of so many, and I was amazed at the magnitude of Lucifer's influence. Never before did I realize how many of the host had aligned with him. Strange as it may seem, I was still lonely in his absence. Though I believed everything was though I believed everything he was doing was wrong, he was still my brother. He returned to exile. His return to exile was a painful blow. Many others felt it as well, for many friendships were severed when Lucifer whisked away his followers. Michael was absolutely frantic, enlisting Gabriel and Raphael to scour heaven for the missing. He couldn't be consoled and would not stop his hunt until they were found. Unfortunately, Michael didn't find them in time to prevent a crisis. The host was called to the Great Hall. From my seat high above the first circle, I nervously watched my brothers file into the worship area. Tensions rose with each new face. The uneasy silence positively deafening. No one spoke. No one looked another in the eye. Michael entered, exhausted, and headed for his chair, eyes darting around the gathering and hands quivering. Beside him came Gabriel, with his narrow face and curly hair. They did not speak, but the gestures and expressions they exchanged were as loud as any words. Raphael arrived a short time later. I remembered our discussion about Lucifer before the change, and as I thought of this, he glanced up and gave me a curt nod. Lucifer's chair sat empty. Though this had become the norm, its vacancy now was especially unsettling. The ornate wings rising from its high back now seemed a testament to Lucifer's inflated pride, a precursor to the turmoil he was causing. Indeed, when the last angel had finally taken his seat, the anxiety that gripped us all was only made worse by the grand presence of that chair. I couldn't believe it. A full third of the hall was unoccupied, empty seats like holes punched throughout the gathering. Murmurs confirmed that my brothers felt as I did in the face of such an astonishing sight. Michael was beside himself, wringing his hands as he looked at the broken assembly. The presence of the Almighty suddenly filled the hall, and all was forgotten as divine light pierced everything. In the throng of warmth and love, the host was on its feet singing hymns of praises. And all the trouble that Lucifer and his followers seemed some strange dream barely remembered. The song's emotion reverberated off every surface, and I was at peace. Unfortunately, though, as with every song, ours had an ending, and we came to it all too quickly. The final note passed my lips to twist and turn its beautiful dance through the air, then glide from the hall of song into the rest of heaven. I hoped Lucifer and the others could hear us wherever they were. Then the note faded, leaving only terrible silence. The choir sat in unison, the swishing of robes seeming imagined after the blaring hymn. All my attention was focused on the Almighty, awaiting his first words to our decimated host. Would he be angry? Puzzled? My hands shook with anxious curiosity, but silence ruled for what seemed an eternity. Michael must have suffered worst of all, for it was he who finally broke it. It could not be helped, Father. He would not listen, and the Almighty quieted Michael with a raised hand. All is well, Michael, he said, his voice coming from every direction, booming yet full of love. I wondered how all could possibly be well, but my answer came immediately. The enormous doors of the hall burst open, startling all save for the Almighty. A flood of angels poured from the opening, the torrent headed by one whose odd glow was now familiar. Lucifer strode to the foot of the throne, his face defiant. The line of his followers snaked back toward the doors to form a crowd just outside the first circle. Michael stood and shouted, No, Lucifer, you know not what you are about to do. I beg you to end this now. Lucifer cocked his head as if Michael were the biggest fool in all creation, then returned his gaze to God. I couldn't breathe. My brother Lucifer, my best friend, standing in open rebellion against the Almighty, I could see even from my seat that the expression on his face was unthinkable in the presence of God. Hatred. The Almighty looked down at him without anger, only love and concern. There was a rippling in the light, and suddenly the hall dimmed. The immense form of God dissipated in wisps of light, and a being no bigger than Lucifer himself was left standing on the stage. Lucifer, please, come forward, God said, offering his hand. Lucifer waited just long enough to show it was by his will alone, not the Almighty's, that he complied. He didn't take God's hand. Undeterred, God continued, You have always spoken to me in times of trouble. What can I do to help you now? Lucifer opened his mouth, but hesitated. I've always liked to believe that in that short moment, before making his thoughts known to us all, Lucifer, Lucifer realized that he was about to do Lucifer realized what he was about to do and became frightened. That he wanted to return to his old ways and become again what he once was. I like to believe he knew he was wrong. Most of all, though, I like to hope that in that moment we had a glimpse of some goodness still left in my brother. But whatever caused Lucifer to pause did not win the battle in his mind. As I said, the moment was short. I demand to be recognized as your equal, Lucifer called out. The entire host burst into a cacophony of disbelief and awe. Even Lucifer's followers seemed surprised. Lucifer, you know this to be untrue, the Almighty replied in a gentle tone. He stepped forward, but Lucifer backed away from this tiny embodiment of God. You are wrong. I am your equal. I command power above my brothers, just as you do, and I am praised for it, as are you. You gave me more responsibility than any other angel, and you entrust me with secrets you share with no other. My radiance rivals yours in beauty. I have experienced more than any other angel. I have even created water from nothing. No other angel understands what I do. Now, none have felt what I have felt, and like you, I have followers who have vowed to serve me as their master, as their king, as their God. I create, I command praise, I possess knowledge and power above all others, and I have worshippers. I am God, just like you. I looked down to see the horror frozen on Michael's face, unable to stop Lucifer now. More importantly, there were tears coursing down his cheeks. If only Lucifer would see them. The Almighty spoke calmly. Lucifer, my child, can you not see the error in your ways? False praise has clouded your mind. You do not understand what you are saying. I will tell you what I understand, Lucifer began again. I understand that you are a selfish God. a God who accepts no other as his equal, despite all evidence to the contrary. I glanced at Gabriel, his eyes wide in disbelief, and then to Raphael, who looked utterly fascinated. You demand we sing your praise, never questioning why you deserve it. Then, when one of your children matures and as I have and becomes as the Father, you would deny him. You fail to recognize the power I have attained and give me what should be mine, the shared position as head of this family. And for what reason? You are afraid. Afraid to admit you are not as omnipotent as you would have us believe. Afraid to relinquish even a portion of power because you are a selfish God and you cannot bear to think of anyone else as your equal. But I am. The host was in an uproar, unsure of what to do: keep quiet and listen to the debate or call out and join in. I was in such shock that I couldn't process anything. The defiance on Lucifer's face, the sound of my brothers whispering, Michael's streaming tears, the radiance of the Almighty. So perfect it was almost painful to look at it. All these things and more I saw and heard, but I was unable to put any of it together. Even now, your children are dividing. I know you know this, because like me, you are God. You feel it as I do. Can there be two? They wonder. Confusion spreads about what I have brought into the open for all to see, splitting them into factions. Listen, Lucifer placed a hand to his ear as though we were oblivious to the sound. Those who had followed him into the hall, as well as a few others among us in the seats, began to sing for him. The angels around them scrambled to silence them, hands grasping for the rebels. It was only a moment before the entire hall was in upheaval, with angels climbing over angels to reach those singing and those singing fighting to remain free. Your place as father is dissolving. Your children have shown you their decision. It is you who must realize the error in your ways, for they will tolerate it no longer. They recognize me as their superior. That makes me God. I have transcended to your level. The song for Lucifer continued to swell as more and more angels joined in. Whether they had been planted or were only now conceding was impossible to know. The struggle grew more aggressive, brothers shoving and clawing at each other, and I thought this would at least force the hymn to stop, but it only grew more powerful, like some sort of rallying chant, and Lucifer beamed as God glared at him. It was a look of victory, the smile of a conquering hero. Finally, God dropped the loving tone and took back control. Enough, he called out, his voice shaking the halls of heaven. The Almighty's form swirled to its original size, his light flooding over everyone. The singing cut off abruptly as every angel cowered at the voice with the power to create worlds. God glared at Lucifer with a look so terrible not even he could meet the gaze. I created you from nothingness. I gave you life eternal and paradise in which to spend it. I loved you and bestowed upon you great power, more even than your brothers, because you were the first, and because I created you to have such power. Your voice was once loudest in the heavenly choir, returning to me the love I gave you and showing your thanks for the gifts I gave you. But what is this you do now? You interrupt your brother's gathering and proclaim to all of creation your selfishness, your foolishness, your pride. Pride in yourself above all other things, even me, the one who made you. You listened to those who exalted you. From their praise you spawned this evil. Now it controls you to such extent that you believe yourself to be my equal. You come before me and admit this horrible truth. And what am I to do now? The Almighty paused for a moment. The air seemed to tremble in the silence. Never again will you be free of this pride. Even if I strip it from you, you will come to it again in time. You do have the power to create, Lucifer, in that you are correct. You have created something unknown to heaven, unknown to your brothers until this day. You have created sin, but it is a creation of evil. And while you do not yet realize what evil is, it has no place in this kingdom. Neither is there a place for those who partake in it. I didn't understand. If Lucifer had no place in heaven, then where was he to go? I banish you, Lucifer, you who would wear his pride as a sign of perfection when it is a stain never to be cleansed. Never again will I permit you within heaven's halls. I strip you of your holiness, tainted as it might be. You are a creature of the evil you have birthed, and your form will reflect that which you have sired. As God spoke, no angel could look away. A few shouts of terror echoed through the hall as Lucifer's white wings suddenly bled a dark ichor. staining his feathers black, his bizarre radiance becoming a pulsating darkness. You shall serve an eternity of damnation for what you have done. The dark place you went to create this sin has now been made into a dungeon, and now shall possess, and none shall possess any key to free you of your prison. Then, to our dismay, those of my brothers who sang for Lucifer were lifted from the crowd and drawn toward him. As they reached his side, they were held immobile by God's will. All of you have elected to join Lucifer in sin, who envy Lucifer's position or see him as another God. All of you will share his sentence. You have chosen not to recognize me, so I do not recognize you. You are all banished from my kingdom. A thunderous roar snapped our attention to the open doors of the hall. Through them I saw a massive gate take form at the edge of the commons outside, severing a large part of heaven from the halls. The gate yawned wide to reveal this piece of heaven falling away into a void of nothingness. And as it fell, it ignited into a raging pit of flame. Fire spurted back towards heaven in scorching flares. Many angels hid their faces from the churning inferno. The newly banished screamed in fear, but none were able to move. They cried out for God to forgive them, but he simply watched as flames shot forth like tentacles, hundreds of arms reaching into heaven to ensnare my brothers. They shrieked in pain and terror. I covered my ears, but still could I hear them. Flesh seared, bubbling and bursting, wings charred, becoming black as Lucifer's. The flames then retracted, and angel after angel was plucked from the kingdom, unable to escape as the fiery tendrils yanked them into the furnace below. Finally, all of my banished brothers were gone, all except Lucifer, who stood glaring at God. A serpent of flame coiled around his body, but did not pull him away or burn his flesh. God continued, "From this day forward, you will bear the name Satan and will be loathed by all of creation. You will become the evil you have created, forever recognized as my enemy." Michael wept at these words. The rest of us stood in shocked silence. I'm sure this only compounded Lucifer's fears. The vast columns of angels gazing down at him like some creature. No angel could ever have imagined what we just seen. I thought if I shook my head, I'd find that none of it actually happened. But Lucifer was still there, a chain of flame linking him to the inferno far below. God spoke his last words to Lucifer then: "Go now and never return." I know you as my child no longer. The flame surged around Lucifer. He screamed as his flesh burned, and small horns pierced the skin on his head. His cobalt eyes burst and split from their sockets, and his entire body caught fire. My brother became a blazing star. His screaming did not falter as the tendril snapped taut and ripped him from heaven. The gates slammed shut, and a terrible silence descended. The only sound was Michael's lamenting. The hair encircling his face had turned gray, where it was wetted by his selfless tears, streaks of silver now staining the black. The Almighty ended the gathering, ensuring us all would now be well. God asked Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael to remain, and the rest of us filed out, too stunned to speak. I returned to my hall in mourning. Absent mindedly, I wove bloom after bloom, hoping to distract myself with work, but when I finished, I found I'd created a portrait of Lucifer. Fearing reprisal, I quickly destroyed it. Am I never to see Lucifer again? I wondered. Is his punishment more than he can bear? How I wished I could have helped him when he needed me most. Visions of what Lucifer was now suffering filled my mind, along with the thoughts that what happened to him was in some way my fault, because he came to me and I had no answer for him. The more I thought about it, the worse I felt. I sat alone and stared at nothing while my mind raced over all that had happened and accused me of not stopping it. Sadness, sadness consumed me. Not even the beauty of heaven could shake me from it. The colors around me were gray. The songs sounded like lies, and I was indifferent to everything. There was no denying it. A large part of me had gone with Lucifer into the flames.